Hi, everyone. I'm Albert Roy, and I'm delighted to welcome you to the Hope in Action Fireside Chat from the Lupus Research Alliance. Everything we do across the Lupus Research Alliance is guided in one purpose: identifying and enabling research to drive the discovery and development of better diagnostics and curative treatments for those living with lupus. Science is accelerating in exciting ways. Advances in drug discovery, technology, and precision medicine are enabling new treatment possibilities. Because progress isn't just about discovery, it's about delivery. Our Hope in Action Fireside Chat is a chance to bring you into the conversations, shaping what comes next, and to meet extraordinary people like Dr. Saira Sheikh, our guest today. Dr. Saira Sheikh is the Linda Coley Sewell Distinguished Professor of Medicine at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. Dr. Sheikh is a nationally renowned physician, researcher, clinical trials investigator, and educator. She is trained and triple board certified in internal medicine, rheumatology, and allergy and immunology. Saira is the director of the clinical trials program at the UNC Thurston Arthritis Research Center and the UNC Rheumatology Lupus Clinic. And finally, Saira is also the chair of the Lupus Clinical Investigators Network, coordinated by Lupus Therapeutics, the clinical affiliate of the Lupus Research Alliance. And most importantly, Saira is just an incredible human being. Thank you for being here today, Saira.
Thank you, Al, for that very kind introduction. I'm so honored to be here. Thank you for having me.
So, one thing that strikes me when I sort of see you in your domain as a rheumatologist and seeing patients, and that you've dedicated your career to seeing lupus patients. And it's very clear based on your passion with them and around them and how you speak about it, that just sort of very palpable. And I think anyone that knows you as a patient feels that as well, which I think makes you so great at what you do. What drew you to this work?
Thank you, Al. Again, you're so incredibly kind. So when I think about what drew me to this work, I think it's the humans and the science, and in that order. So as we recognize, lupus is one of the most complex and immunologically challenging diseases in medicine. And early in my training, I was fascinated not just by the science, but really by the incredible resilience of individuals who live with this disease every day. As we know, people are navigating so much uncertainty, delayed diagnosis, and a disease that challenges and affects every part of their lives, right? Physically, emotionally, socially. And I realized that caring for people with lupus is more than just treating a disease. It's really learning to sit with someone in uncertainty and combining medicine with really a deep respect for the lived experience of our patients. And so, when it comes to the immune system, it's sort of like what I say to my patients. We talk a lot about the immune system, but, what is it? You can't really see it, you can't feel it, you can't touch it. And still, it has this powerful role to protect us, to fight against infections, invaders, to keep us safe. And then, just like that, for reasons that are not really still clear to anyone, one day the immune system starts to attack itself, and then you have this disease that can impact any organ system of the body from head to toe. No two patients have the same brand of lupus. So I think it was that combination, the scientific challenge and the opportunity to really make a difference is what has kept me devoted to this work.
I feel the same way, but I come at it from a different angle, right? So having the privilege of leading the Lupus Research Alliance and working with a great team and being able to interface with physician investigators like yourself, with researchers, with industry, and I think most importantly with patients, right? There's a sense of urgency that you and I both see from individuals living with lupus, and we see that every day in through our own different lenses. And so, what I wanted to ask were really two questions related to this sense of urgency. One is, what do you see as sort of the biggest challenges? And rather than challenges, let's call them opportunities right now within clinical care and perhaps even clinical research. And then, secondly, what excites you most about the research landscape and the treatment and the lupus treatment landscape, if you will? I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
talking about challenges or opportunities, like you said, I still think in 2026, access to care remains a great challenge, right? Access to specialists, access to, we're excited and energized by new therapies when they become available, but to recognize that there's still difficulties with access to new therapies for so many of our patients. And then focus really on the work that we are doing through the network. Access to clinical trials still a problem, right? Many patients are still facing delays in diagnosis. There are challenges in patients feeling heard and understood within the healthcare system, right? And we hear that. I know we hear that every single day. And then there are the complexities of the disease itself. But I guess, to think about excitement, to balance that with challenges, I think what's really exciting is that we're seeing real scientific momentum that's translating into hope for patients. So for many years, we all sort of witnessed that lupus was lagging behind other diseases. But because of the contributions of so many amazing people and partnerships, the LRA has had an incredible role in that. The advances in immunology, genomics are all helping us better understand the disease. But I think we have a responsibility to make sure that progress reaches patients in a meaningful and equitable way.
What can we do better in that regard to sort of facilitate that, whether it's in the confines of our network as a community or just as an organization or as a community in general, on making sure that we're bringing these new therapies to these people that need it by through awareness first, but then
Mm.
also through being able to provide it to them as a potential opportunity.
I would say, the first step is always awareness, education, like spreading the word. And I think you and the LRA, Lupus Therapeutics, are doing a tremendous job in that space, right? But it's then the question you're asking is how do you take this momentum and then really translate it into actual action and change and impact, right? And that is happening on many levels, from discovery, right, all the way to the clinic. I think the LRA too is empowering patients to be tremendous advocates for themselves, right? We last year were at Capitol Hill together, really doing that very important work that I think maybe you can touch on, that really translated into actual change and impact, right, for lupus research. It feels like change is slow and incremental, but I think now finally we're seeing all of it, coming together and really things coming to fruition.
I'd love if I could, as we're talking about sort of momentum, whether it's in the network. I'm curious, right? There's real momentum around next generation approaches for therapies. And the biggest one I think that everyone's excited about, I'm assuming many of your patients are excited about, and I know you're active in this space, are cell
Mhm.
therapies and non-immunosuppressive approaches with specific antibodies, right? And so, how should we think about cell therapies and some of these non-immunosuppressive approaches in lupus right now?
Great question. And yes, there is tremendous excitement around these therapies. And I think it's because they are challenging the way that we used to think about treating autoimmune disease, right? Or immune-mediated disease. It is a fundamentally different way of thinking about how we treat immune-mediated disease. So traditionally, as you pointed out, the majority of our therapies are focused on suppressing the immune system. And now what's exciting and energizing about cell-based therapies is that it's allowing us to consider a reset or almost like a retraining of the immune system, something that I think most of us really didn't ever imagine was possible, right? So I think that piece, the fact that it's challenging us in ways that we didn't really think about before, is very, very energizing. But important to point out that there is tremendous work that was done over the years, really, that got us to the point that now we're seeing this momentum, right? So it almost feels like the science is now catching up to the complexity of lupus. But really understanding the immune system in much more precise ways, I would say, is what's opening up the door to therapies that are not just suppressing the disease, but potentially resetting it. And as
Mhm.
you also pointed out, I'm a cell therapy not just enthusiast, but also at this point have significant expertise in this space.
Mhm.
And I'll say this. So scientifically, right, that the early data are incredibly compelling, especially for patients with severe refractory disease who really have not responded to conventional therapies. And it's such an important proof of concept um, to say that if we better understand immune dysfunction, we can really intervene in transformative ways. But the practice of medicine, I will tell you as a physician, right? And
Mhm.
as someone who is in science is so very humbling. So we have to balance, the this excitement with some thoughtful caution. But we also want to be energized because our patients need these therapies now, right? And patients are benefiting as we witness through clinical trials. These therapies are really transformative. So we still have ways to go, right? We need larger studies, we need more follow-up, we need data on durability and safety and access. And then also, lupus is a very heterogeneous disease. So one therapy or one approach that works for some patients may not work for everybody. But I think we are, I think joined in our shared excitement, or I think I share your enthusiasm and the enthusiasm of the lupus community in this space.
Sarah, it strikes me, and I'm just curious. So I've had multiple conversations with people living with lupus when they hear about cell therapies and what's happening in sort of in the clinic, right? How they're being evaluated in clinical trials. And many of these patients would be patients that aren't eligible for these trials. But yet, and perhaps maybe their disease is even fairly mild or moderate and well controlled.
Mhm.
But the prospects of potentially not having to take any more medications, right? If you were to going through this type of a treatment, the prospects of that in their mind, the risk to benefit, the benefit is so much greater. And so many say, when can we participate in these
Mhm.
types of trials?
Mhm.
What do we say? What do you say as a physician investigator if and when patients come to you that aren't eligible for these trials, but want to have a chance to participate in what could be essentially a paradigm shifting type of treatment?
The patient community is asking for opportunities for when these can be more generalizable is a very fair question, right? So I have a personal opinion, which is on cell therapy, CAR T cell therapy, which is I think we are using it late and not in the way that I think truly defines immune reset. Personal opinion, that's my disclosure, right? And my disclaimer. Um, yes, right now, because of the fact that it's so novel in the autoimmune disease space. So remember, again, cell therapy, CAR T cell therapy has been around for a while, right? There are multiple approved CAR T cell therapies available for hematologic malignancies. So this is not a new therapy. What's new is that it's now being studied and applied to autoimmune diseases. So I think foundationally, I would love for us to get to the day when we are sitting across from patients who have moderate to severe disease or early and high risk disease. And we can say, like, instead of cycling through all of these therapies and toxicities, right? Maybe there's a chance of immune reset earlier or upfront, right? So that's one sort of novel paradigm shifting way that I think we can and should be thinking about cell therapy or CAR T cell therapy. Lots of optimism, cautious optimism. I love that our patients are just always showing up, right? Patients with lupus are ready to show up. They're here. They want to be involved. They want to be part of the progress. So that's really what I say. I think that, and you know this about me, I say to patients always, at some point in your journey with lupus, you may be a candidate for a clinical trial. That point may not be now or today, uh,
Mhm.
but there is a point in your journey that you could be a candidate for a clinical trial, and then we are here to offer those opportunities to you.
Well, I share your opinion on sort of the timing of the intervention, to be honest with you, and this is my opinion since we're sharing opinions too. Because in my mind, the earlier you intervene, the
Mhm.
less damage you can accrue. I do too hope that we can sort of make access to this very novel and potentially paradigm shifting treatment to those who don't need to have to continue to accrue damage until they're eligible to participate. So there's an evolution of not only the clinical care landscape with these updates because there's new treatments being approved, um, but because of that, I think there's really a need to expand participation to a broader group of lupus patients who have not been historically eligible for clinical trials, notwithstanding the cell therapy, just generally clinical trials. And so, how do we balance this? And what do we need to do as a community, a research community, and a trial community to sort of think about new therapies are going to come on board, but we still need to innovate and we still need to have part clinical trials, right? How do we broaden that to a greater group of patients?
I think about clinical trials not like we're filling trials with patients, right?
Mhm.
We are bringing access and opportunity to participate in clinical trials to patients who need them the most, wherever they are. And I think the work that the LRA, Lupus Therapeutics, and the network is doing is foundational in sort of connecting the dots in this area. I think we need to simplify and modernize clinical trial participation, right? That's a foundational principle. What does that mean? More flexible trial designs, like we talked about. The visits, does everything need to happen at a major center? What can happen closer to home? This idea of perhaps some components of a decentralized trial. I think clinical trials need to mirror clinical practice. I think
Mhm.
that
Right.
is the key area that I think we need work in. And then, like you said, we need to think about clinical trial opportunities in day-to-day care, right? And this involves many things. As investigators, we think about eligibility criteria, where, like we just talked about, where it's safe and scientifically sound, it makes sense to broaden participation, right? Or broaden opportunities for participation. So I think that the fact that our trials don't really mirror our real world practice is a major sort of hurdle and a major difficulty when it comes to enrolling clinical trial patients into clinical trials. The goal is not to make clinical trials a separate system, but really a natural extension of care, right? A
Right.
natural extension of care that reflects the real world diversity and complexity of patients who are living with the disease today.
So, Sarah, when you think about people living with lupus today, if there was one change, whether it's scientific, clinical, or community related, what do you think that change would be that would be most meaningful to improve the lives in the short term for those folks?
Earlier and more precise treatment selection. I think
Mm.
it's 2026, and as a physician, it is so unsettling that we have just trial and error as the
Mhm.
way that we select treatments for our patients, right? We need a more personalized approach to therapy. Right now, as we talked about in our discussions, too many patients cycle through medications before they find what works. And that delay matters because, as you touched upon, ongoing inflammation leads to irreversible damage in this disease. So I think if I had, one change, it would be that if we could better match the right treatment to the right patient earlier, using whether it's clinical features or what we call phenotyping, biomarkers, ultimately molecular signatures, we could really change the trajectory of this disease and not just manage it. And I think that's where a lot of the science is heading, and has the potential to be truly transformative. But I think what really gives me hope is that our patients continue to show up every day, right? They participate in research, they're advocating for better care, even while they're living with this very difficult disease. It makes me feel like we really are at this turning point.
Well, I think we are because we have people like you and your colleagues working in tandem with the Lupus Research Alliance and Lupus Therapeutics and our Lucid network and our colleagues in industry. And I think, while we're not while we see the light at the end of the tunnel, it's still down the tunnel, but there is a light and light means hope. And I think to your point, I think we're getting there closer and closer every day, and that light's getting brighter and brighter, which means we're getting closer and closer. So, Sarah, as we get to the end of our conversation today, if there was one thing that you wanted to leave or convey to those living with lupus, what would that be?
So we know that the word lupus is Latin for wolf. And in this metaphor, to me, the wolf represents all the things about lupus that can feel threatening or overwhelming to our patients. And the butterfly, which is a symbol of lupus awareness, represents hope and resilience and transformation. And it reminds us that there is room for hope and progress alongside the struggle.
Well, beautiful. I don't think there's anything else that I need to say following that. I really want to, number one, thank you and for your leadership, Saira. It's an incredible pleasure to work with you and everyone in the lupus community, but certainly you as a leader. You know, what we've talked about today is more than science and research. It's about people. It was about momentum, and it's about turning hope into action. One conversation, one breakthrough, and one step forward at a time. There are more voices to hear, there's more ideas to explore, and more reasons to be hopeful. And we'd love for you to continue the journey with us. Well, we hope all of you will come back and be part of this conversation as it continues. And together we'll look ahead and explore what's next in the future of lupus research and clinical care. And along the way, highlight how the Lupus Research Alliance contributes to this ecosystem in driving the development of better diagnostics and curative treatments. We'll see you again soon.